Hello again and welcome to another in our continuing hops and skips around this great planet of ours. We are looking down on the mighty dash from the control tower of Mumbai International Airport, otherwise known as land of the sunken runways, truncated jetways, and giant trees. I've actually managed to solve our elevation issues, and I've also managed to solve the audio slippage problem, which I'll fill you in on in a bit, in case you're using Shadowplay to record flights and then Adobe Premiere to edit them, such as it is. But anyway, this is what it looks like down on the ground, and at least from this side the airport looks pretty good. However, when we finally do get out to the runway, you'll see that the runway lights are still fighting with one another. But here is where we are going today. The reason why we are flying these things fast and furious is because I want to get to the stop after this one. We are going first to Lucknow, which is one of the most beautiful cities in northeastern India, and it's the capital of the Uttar Pradesh state, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. I obviously don't have Hindi. Matter of fact, I don't have Punjabi. As a matter of fact, I don't have Urdu or just about any other language spoken anywhere in the region except English, which is spoken there a lot and is spoken there very quickly. English speakers seem to speak English much faster there than they do almost any other place in the world, except maybe the trading floor of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, but that's another story. Anyway, we're going to go like so. We are going to fly from here to there, and then we'll get to Kathmandu probably in a couple days. But I badly want to fly in there, and I'm sure you guys are itching to get a good look at me fump my way around the terrain. But anyway, for a change in our database, we do. Let me just mute that for a second. We do have a SID. As a matter of fact, we have a multiplicity of SIDs in the annoying but indispensable Navigraph charts. So this is how we're getting out of here. We are going to... The other thing you'll notice is that every single one of these SIDs is an RNAV and radar vectors. There are no conventional fly it the old-fashioned way SIDs coming out of here. And in many parts of the world, there are precious few VOR stations anymore. It is all GPS. Here, let me just show you the SID we're going to come off of. That is right over there. And you look at the restrictions. DME is required, inertial reference is required, or GNSS is required, radar is required, RNAV is required. These are not your father's SIDs, but we are going to fly out on this one, the Anoli 1A, and we're going to take the variation that ends in Posen out here, because that's the direction we're going. And so what that is going to involve is, I believe, a takeoff and a right turn. Let's take a look. Here's Anoli. Let's find out. Anoli, okay, with the Posen transition. 7,000 by Posen or above. But let me just see if there's another page of narrative. No, of course not. All right. It's this fix by this altitude and then direct to this fix. I'm sorry. This fix at this altitude, direct to this fix at or above 2600 by this fix, and then 7000 by Posen. All right, so that pretty much takes care of that. And we can look at it in our FMS, and we'll see that it is runway heading, then direct to that fix at or above that altitude. That checks. And then Anole direct and actually at or below 7,000. So let's very quickly set 7,000 for our altitude. It is set. We're in LNAV. We're in pink needles. We can do our taxi flows right now. Turn on our pumps. Auxes, all of our heats are already on. Lights are in taxi, bleeds are on in min. Caution panel is clear. Oh, let's see. Flaps are set, V-speeds are set, trim is set, rudder trim is set. Check our hydraulics. Well, first turn off the gust lock and check our controls. They are good and good. I'm going to do the old trick for starting up a situation with SUIPC. If the flaps are here, sometimes instead of going up when you hit up, they don't go anywhere and they only go up when you hit down. So let's see. See? I'm hitting up and they're not going anywhere. Now watch what happens when I hit down. That click you're hearing is my switch. I hit down and look, they go up. So I'm just going to cycle through them so that when we retract the flaps on takeoff, they actually do retract. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to cycle my props and make sure that my power levers are good, and they are. Put the gust lock back in, check our standby hydraulics, open up the isolation valve for the number 3 hydraulic system, thereby pressurizing it. Kill the caution, turn it off, thereby depressurizing it, and just working the rudder here just to see it, make it drop. That's done. Turn aux pump number 1 on again, because sometimes it pops off. And guard that switch again. And make sure that our nose wheel steering is on, and it is. We'll just open that up so that we don't get all misty. And that should render us good to go. What will render us even better to go is if we set runway heading, which is 271. There it is. And we will head out to the active. We'll check our transponder. We're already squawking Charlie, which is fine for this airport. Some airports you won't, you'll squawk standby till you take the runway. Still have weird texture issues, but we'll do what we can. Seems to be a nice effort at a very complicated airport, but it's not really meant yet for prepared version 3. Kind of shoehorned it in here, so I've got no right to complain at all, but I will. Just take a mosey there. And the one last thing we'll do is check the weather before we take the runway. See, there's some flickering textures there, but at least we're not sinking halfway into the runway at this point, so that much is good. You'll notice I'm taxiing just a little bit briskly here. Don't try that at home, kids. Don't try it with your company, because, you know, They frown on that, and you burn up brake pads, but we're not paying for brake pads, are we? I like to call this, instead of FS economy, I like to call this FS extravagance, the way we fly. Alright, we'll nuzzle up to there, set the parking brake, turn off the gust lock, check the weather one last time. Looks like we are at winds, a teeny tiny tailwind, that's fine. 2985 is our altimeter, and we'll cross-check that with the airfield elevation, which is about 15. So we will set our altimeter right here. And notice when we go down to 2985, yeah, it gets to about 25 feet. That's fine. All right, we'll set an acceleration altitude of about 1,040 feet. And that is done. Do a quick gumpity-bumpity check there. Make sure all my switches are fine. I should have about 10 degrees of right trim. I do. I should actually set this up, nav source, for that so that I'm getting a green needle in nav 2, and let me put in 112.1 into nav 2 just so that we have the Bombay BBB VOR available to us just for guidance. All right, here we go. We've been cleared to take the runway. This is going to be an N-top takeoff, normal takeoff power. Get on our lights. On come the landing lights, off come the taxi lights, on come the local lights, anti-collision lights go to white. One last check, we're good. And you see the flickering lights here. I'm sorry to have to subject you to it, but we'll get out of here as quickly as possible. We'll end this acid nightmare right here. Spoilers can come to flight. V-speeds can be checked. One last check. Gust lock off. Props max. Flaps 10. Yes, yes, yes. In go-round mode, outsell 7,000. We have to hit 530 feet by our first fix. I would be surprised if we don't hit 5,300 feet by our first fix. That's how quickly this plane climbs. Everything else is golden. Our APU is off. And you can verify that because the fuel valve up there is closed. Main bus tie is off. So let's get going. Start our clock. Superstitiously check to see if our engines are stable, and they are. These are FADEC controlled, so you really don't have to do anything to them except jam the power forward. Alright, well, the runway lights are floating, but at least the runway isn't floating. So we're going to look first for 80 knots. That little beep is because I blipped the trim nose down just a little bit, because I always find there's too much nose up trim on initial climb out. Alright, there's V1. Going to nicely and continuously rotate up to there and establish that we are climbing with a positive rate. Follow the flight director. Bring up the gear. Okay, we've already hit that, and we're 5 miles away from our first waypoint, so that's going to be fine. At the yellow mark on the right there that's creeping in, we're going to bring our props down to 900. Nose down slightly, bring up the flaps. Try to maintain a course here, trim down. decelerate a little bit. That's why I'm staying below that magenta line right now. Adjust our rudder trim a little bit. And at this point, I'm just going to ease off the stick. Let us come up to about 190 and change our mode of climb from go around to IAS. And from here on out, let's make it 191. From here on out, it will give us guidance to climb us at 191 knots. So now I'm just finger tipping the controls here and looking at our radar, glancing at it with my right eye, and I'm really not seeing anything of concern, which is good. And we'll just trim a little nose down here so we maintain our speed. And hello. Oh, we have to intercept this next leg, which is why it just did that. Although why it gave us a head fake to the left first, I don't know. Looks like we'll be flying into a little turbulentus moderatus by the looks of it. Possibly. I'm going at a decent turbulence penetration speed anyway, which is anywhere from about 190 to about 210. Maybe we'll climb above it. Alright, now we have to level off at 7 for the moment, so let me do that. Pop in our autopilot, and as we do that, do a little spring cleaning here. And we're above the muck, so turn our fasten seatbelt sign off. Lights can come off. Above the transition altitude, we can go to standard. And we'll make sure we capture our altitude. Spin our heading bug around. And let us make believe we got cleared up to an intermediate altitude. So let's say we just got cleared up to 12,000 feet. Okay, so we'll first go into vertical speed mode. Pick up the nose a little bit. Don't worry about that. We're going to slow down toot sweet here. See? Because I gave ourselves a 2,000 foot per minute climb. I'm going to do that till the speed comes off. And then we'll resume IAS mode. But I'm just doing that as a way to smooth our way into a kind of cruise climb here. Alright, so we're going to let the speed come off. And then we'll flip over to IAS mode. And the other thing I'll do is just keep an eye on the radar, and it is fine. There, out in this direction here, there's some sigmats, but we are not concerned about them at the moment because we're going to go to the southeast of them. Still, it's a pretty Pretty cloudy day here. Let's see what the frames look like. Alright, there we go, turning on to our next leg. It's funny, look at this. I get far better frames in here. No, it's about the same. Anyway, so basically what we're doing is we're circling back over Mumbai. We came from there, and we're just heading out this way, and wow, that sure cleared up. Okay, 1,000 feet away. I'll pop us into IAS mode there. And what I'll do is I'll start to creep the speed forward, and so that will ease our leveling off a little bit, because it's going to bring the nose down. And I also eased off the power a little. We still blew through it a little bit because we were going up like a bat out of you-know-where. Alright. Now, we will be cleared to our cruising altitude by Hopal. Now you see, I could have sworn I had Alt Cell selected. If I didn't, shame on me. Which is why we blew through our altitude. I think I had Alt Cell selected, but if I didn't, that's a reminder. Always hit that magic button. Alright, well, we're close to our turning point anyway. Now, we'll spin our bug up to 27,000. We will put ourselves, let's do it this way now. We'll put ourselves into IAS mode. And we'll set our climb to about 190 knots. And we will not forget, if we forgot before, I'll check the video, to hit the magic Alt Cell. The chime luckily warned us we were blowing through it, which is good. But we blew through it, which is bad. Alright, and now we're turning on to approaching the end of our star here. Let's see if we can still see Mumbai in the back. Far distance here, let's see. There we go. That is what we are leaving behind. That's a pretty hefty metropolitan area, isn't it? If I'm not mistaken, that's the field down there. Let's see. I'm looking for flashing runway lights. No, no such luck. It's hidden behind some very lovely clouds. So look at that, 30 frames a second there. Zoom out, and it's almost 60. And pop into the cockpit, and it is 60. By the way, real quickly, actually that brings up the thing I mentioned before about having problems with the audio drifting out of sync with the video in Adobe Premiere. And first I thought, well, I'm doing an edit wrong, I'm dissolving it wrong, I'm importing it wrong, I'm doing something wrong. It turns out it's a well-known problem, and it's something that Adobe isn't doing a goddamn thing about. And it's a shame, and I'll explain all of that in a second. But what it basically is that Premiere does not do well with variable frame rates on a video source. When you record something off a camcorder or a professional video recorder, it's a fixed rate. It's 24 frames, 25 frames, 2997, drop frame, non-drop frame, but no matter how you slice it, it stays the same. When you use a program like Fraps, it's fixed, or can be fixed. However, when you use shadow play to capture video, if you've got an NVIDIA card, which I happen to think is the preferred way to capture video because it doesn't gobble up your frame rates. As a matter of fact, it barely has any effect at all on your frame rates, which is wonderful. The way it does it is by grabbing the video basically practically directly off the video card, and that means that anything your game is giving it in terms of frame rates, it captures. What it does not do is what, say, Fraps can do if you ask it to, which is to spit it all out at 30 frames or 60 frames. To do that means that you have to get the CPU involved, and you have to make it do some work, and that's going to screw up your gaming experience. So that's the trade-off. The trade-off is use something like Fraps, or I forget the name of the other one, and get constant frame rate, or use shadow play and get variable frame rate. Now, it wouldn't matter if you were using Sony Vegas or I think Final Cut Pro, although I'm not sure. But when it comes to Adobe Premiere, they have not implemented the feature of accepting variable frame rate video. And people on their forums, not the company people. The company people say very simply, look, put in a feature request, and if enough of you do, we'll do it. But there's some snitsy people on their forums, not from the company, who say, well, you know, this is a product for professionals, and professionals don't use variable bitrate things like iPhones, which also spit out variable frame rate. Did I say bitrate? I meant frame rate. But, you know, I work at a major global television network, and these days, at least 25% of what we put on the air comes from people's iPhone videos and eyewitnesses and DSLR cameras and frame grabs and stuff that's posted on YouTube or on other network websites and things. And so actually, to edit that sort of stuff for a fully professional environment on a big TV network, you kind of have to be able to accept variable frame rate source material, because that's just the way it is these days. When I got started in the business, there was a broadcast standard. You could get your license taken away by the FCC if you didn't meet those standards, certain video levels and certain things like that. There was a certain thing called broadcast quality. We knew it when we saw it, and we did not stray from it one little bit. These days, we put on vertical iPhone video from somebody who's happened to catch a tornado blowing by, for the very simple reason that we can't be everywhere, and chances are we're not going to be able to point our broadcast quality cameras at the tornado going by every time. So I would hope that Adobe fixes it. Now, after that long rant, there is a way that you can deal with the problem if it hits you, and it's reasonably simple. What you do is, before you import it into Premiere, you run it through a format conversion program like Handbrake, and in Handbrake, say, you make sure you check the box that says constant frame rate. And then I've found, not everybody else has suggested this, but I found you should select a frame rate, and I select 29.97, which is what the rest of my project is going to be done in. And then I set a lossless transcoding so that it doesn't degrade the video anymore. because it's going to be compressed and transcoded again when you export it, and it's going to be done again when you put it on YouTube. So, you know, the number of transforms you want to do on this should be limited. So I set it to lossless, and I set it to fixed frame rate of 29.97. And then I go have a cup of coffee or a cream soda or a steak or a slice of bacon or a Cobb salad or some frickin' thing. And when I come back from whatever that is that I've done, or maybe something useful for society, maybe I go do some volunteer work or pick up some trash in the park, but whatever it is, and it's not a couple minutes, it's usually an hour or two, I'm left with a converted piece of video that's at a constant frame rate that I can drop into Premiere, and then of course, as you've seen, do my idiotic fade up, dissolve from one part to another, fade down. That's all I really do. I don't do anything fancier than that. I don't do any video inserts. I don't do anything that reminds me of work. So you're not getting great production values, but at least if you get screwed the same way I had been, and you're pulling your hair out, that is the simple but not easy solution. Just run it through Handbrake, set constant, set a frame rate, leave it, and take the converted file and import that into Premiere, and then you should be good to go. Anyway, with that rant pretty much in the history books, let me leave you here, and we'll pick it up closer to top of descent. It should be an interesting approach into Lucknow. I believe it involves flying outbound on the localizer, flying a hold, and coming on back in and no, you know, the more I think about it, it doesn't involve flying a hold. It's even better than that. It involves our old friend, the procedure turn. There's only one ILS approach in here, and a bunch of different transitions from depending on where you go, and we're going to fly this one. We're going to fly to Lucknow, then we're going to fly outbound on the localizer, then we're going to go a like of this and a like of this, and drop on down into a very pretty city. So I'll see ya, as they say in the movies, on the other side. And we're back, the Mighty Dash over central India. We're about 20 minutes past Bhopal, half hour past Bhopal, inbound to Lucknow, and I'd say about 12 minutes from top of descent. But let's see how good we are at our arithmetic. 13 minutes, okay. Briefly put, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a sort of another one of those auto manual arrivals. We are not going to fly the FMS all the way around, although we could. Instead, because the approach looks like this, which is fly to Lucknow from about this direction, make a right at the beacon, head out 6.6 miles, not from the beacon, which is 7 miles, but 6.6 miles from the localizer, which is what we're going to be flying outbound on. Then making a right turn, flying that for about 4 miles, coming back around, re-intercepting. This is essentially a procedure turn. And so what we're going to do is we'll fly pink needles until here. When we get about a mile away, maybe even a little bit less, we will start our turn to 089. And then we will intercept the outbound or the back course, the localizer. Now, I tend to get confused when I do that. Am I going forwards? Am I backwards? Is it reverse sensing? Is it not? Supposedly, if I hit this button right here, it will flip those things around. I'm not going to do it now, obviously. And it will also have the autopilot seek the back course. Just to be on the safe side, I'm going to fly it in heading select mode. I'm going to simply watch it backwards and make my own compensations on the HSI, which I think should be correct no matter what you do. It should be correct whether you're coming at it from behind or coming at it from in front. The deviation should still be the deviation, but you know, it's been so long since I've actually sat there and practiced it that I'm always simply used to here. You notice how the needle's pointing this way. Now, presumably, if I fly this way, this needle will come in and I'll be flying backwards from the station. On the other hand, the needle is pointing this way, so I don't know. These things are actually set up so that the head of the needle should always be eventually should be your heading. So you shouldn't fly it this way. But we'll see what it looks like. And we'll be going slow enough and we'll have enough time, I hope, to learn it as we go. I know it's a cheap cop-out to do that, and it's not very good education I'm providing for you guys, but instead you can instead of learning by doing, you can learn by watching me screw up, and then you can do the opposite. So there is a public service function here. Anyway, this is a Cat 2 arrival if we need it. It is available, so our minima are as little as 100 feet for the ceiling, or decision height, not altitude, but height, because this is a radio altimeter. And if we've got flight director, autopilot, or a HUD, we can come down in as little as 300 meters of runway visibility. So that bodes well, considering this is the only real instrument arrival into Lucknow. Now, the problem is going to be, let me just check our local weather. The problem is going to be that we've got a tailwind, a little bit of a tailwind, 10 knots, which is within limits, but is going to make it sporty. And let's see, 2983, we've got fog. Not a lot of clouds, but fog. We have enough visibility, but the ceiling is going to be the question. And we have, let's see. Okay, 110 at 10. Few at 10,000, broken 20,000. Alright, doesn't have a ceiling. Let's also make sure our radios are set. 109 is the localizer, 1174 is Lucknow, and it is starting to come in, and damn, I gotta set my gauges. I have to do this every time I reset the aircraft, unless I've saved a situation like this, which of course I haven't. So we want to set everything up so that at a glance we can see it. In the real world, the instruments would be big enough and close enough that you can just look down at them, but we need a little bit of help when we're on a screen. I mean, in real life, these are, I think, 6 or 8 inch instruments, so we're obviously not getting that. So we need every little bit of help we can get. And we're already getting a decent amount of help from the fact that this is a 4K display. And we'll scale down a little bit here. And check our HUD setup. Runway length is fine. Runway elevation is fine. Landing altitude is set. Get everybody seated. Everything else is good. Our ground speed actually is, at this point, 352 knots. Our true airspeed is 340. That's because we are all the way up at flight level 270 today, which is about as far up as you can go in the mighty dash without wearing a pressure suit. Or a zoot suit. Or a diving bell. Actually, before we go down, let's do the most important thing I can do tonight. And let's see if I won enough money to buy an airplane. $148 million. 9, no. 28, no. 30, no. 40, no. 61, no. 3, no. You know, there should be some sort of prize for getting absolutely none right, because that seems to me that's an achievement in and of itself. But, all right. I always play the lottery when it gets like over $125 million. It doesn't make it any better. Your odds are probably better of winning if you don't play than if you do. But, you know, spend a couple bucks when it gets to that point, and at least the odds are reasonably fair, because I think the odds of winning are 1 in 65 million, so with $148 million payout, then, and probably $95 million in cash, at least the odds are fair. By the textbook definition of fair. Anyway, I think it was 2983. Let's double check the weather. 2983 it is. I've put a little additive on our V app, which is not going to make it easy or fun. No, wait. It won't make it not easy, but it will make it fun. And let's just see what we look like over there. That is not the Ganges, by the way. We'll be coming up on that shortly, and I will let you know, and you will know that it's the Ganges. I believe that, or the next river over, is the Ganges, but the town we're going to be going over is not there. There we are. It is here. There's Lucknow. And the town we're going to be flying over is Kanpur, and we'll be flying directly over this airport, and you'll see that this will look like another runway. That's because the scenery is very old, but it's been turned into a taxiway. The other thing that you'll see is a second airfield right here, and in addition to that, very clearly, you'll see this big island here and this bridge for Route 25. And let me just step away from one moment, because my neighbors are having a party and it's getting loud. Drunk and stupid is no way to go through life. Alright. VNAV path deviation indicator is showing, so can't engage VNAV because I haven't spun down the altitude. We're going to 3,500. And VNAV and alt cell. I'm going to put a floor on that because I'm going to be managing altitude manually after that point. So again, what we're looking for is the airport, the other airport, the island, and the bridge, and you're going to see all of it. It's pretty cool, actually. Not sure the name of these two rivers. And some of the scenery is pretty, the textures are pretty generic, and it's, you know, Orbix hasn't gotten its hands on it yet. Although it really, at some point, there are going to be a lot of sceneries made for this part of the world, if only because with 1.3 billion human beings in one of the fastest growing aviation markets on Earth, there have got to be tons and tons of people who were into airplanes as kids like I was, and might be working on a pilot's license, might be wanting to fly for the airlines, who knows? So down we go. So it's my bold prediction that at some point in the not too distant future, considering that Boeing and Airbus collectively probably deliver a couple airplanes a day to airlines in Asia, primarily India and China, but also Indonesia and to some extent Malaysia and Thailand and Vietnam, and virtually every place in the whole region is buying airplanes like crazy. And it's because so many people in those countries are flying for the first time, and they can afford to fly for the first time. As a kid, I remember running into sort of old codgers, grew up in the Great Depression, and this was in the 1980s, and you'd get on a plane and there'd be some 70-year-old couple or 80-year-old couple, and they'd be all agog, and you'd wonder why they were all agog, and it's because it was the first time they were flying. The first time they could afford to fly. And so, you know, that went on here in this country, and I imagine it is going on in a lot of countries around the world right at this very moment. So I think if you're worried about Flight Simulator, and I mean that generically, flight simulation, all you need to do is look to the fact that in the Indian subcontinent and China and that whole region, there are about 4 billion people. I mean, if you can't sell a few 100,000 copies of Prepared, or a few tens of thousands of fake airplanes, then you know, you're probably not you're probably in the wrong line of work, because it shouldn't be that hard. All right, we're coming down nicely. I'm just going to cross-check our descent rate by doing a bunch of things. We should be going down by about 3 degrees and 1.9, and our ground speed is 368. That works out to about 1,800 some, and that is. Our needle is not deviated. We've got 60 miles to go, and we have to come down 18,000 feet, which is absolutely perfect. And if I pause every now and again, it's because it just started pouring here in New York. I mean, just absolutely, well, since we're flying to almost that part of the world, monsoon winds and rain. We are just at this moment getting hammered, and I wouldn't know it from looking, because I've got lights on in my apartment, but I know it because the rain is hitting my air conditioner and chassis, and it sounds like Buddy Rich with his big band on the sheet metal there. So if I flinch or act surprised at some point, it's probably because it It sounds like a whole battalion of Buddy Riches wailing on my air conditioner. I'm full of distractions today, aren't I? I've got the Want to Be a Lotto Millionaire. I've got a monsoon hitting. We've, of course, got Donald Trump, which is good for 1 or 2 or 3 drinks. Okay, so we're coming up on the Ganges, and let's get ourselves oriented here. We can't see it yet because of the haze and fog, but what you'll see in a second, well, there is that big island we spoke of, and in a second you'll see the couple of airfields I showed you. I don't know how I got to be such an expert on Kanpur, India, but seeing as I've never been to the Indian subcontinent at all, sort of should be embarrassed. My father and stepmother, who are in the art business, go there all the time to buy art, to buy local art. All right. So there is the airport right there. Let's just zoom in there, and you'll see that well, in a second you'll see that it is showing a runway that's now a taxiway. And there is the second airport. There's the island, and there's the highway bridge. So it's relatively true to life. Pretty ominous looking day. A little bit of low scud. Now, because of the way Active Sky Next is set up on my machine to save a little bit of processing power, at the moment it looks like it's clear. When we descend a little bit more, it will draw in the next layer of clouds, and all of a sudden, poof, will be totally overcast, which is fine. But, well, you'll see it when it happens. It's starting to fade in now, but by the time we get up there, it's going to be pretty much whiteout conditions. So that is a big city on the Ganges, with a big airport that's changed a lot since this scenery was drawn back in the FSX days. Good looking clouds, though. Alright, so we're 38 from Lucknow, VOR, which is where we make our turn. And in a second we'll do our arrival flows. And we'll do them a little bit early just because there's no reason not to, except to be pedantic about it. I mean, if you're flying a plane solo, even if it's a real plane, there are certain things you probably want to get squared away early, even though in certain circumstances, formally, you can leave them till the end. Obviously, you don't want to do things that will burn out or wear out some item that you might need, or burn fuel that you don't have. But speaking as an early beginner real pilot and a longtime fake pilot and a longtime observer of real pilots, including my brother, who's actually infuriatingly is a rather good pilot, even though he's the world's worst driver. He flies gliders, which he incessantly says means he knows something. He's in on a secret that the rest of the world isn't. But all the same, you know, he and others have always told me if the choice is um, putting an extra 10 minutes of wear and tear on something or getting yourself set up in a mental space and in a cockpit space, ready to face the unexpected, then obviously do that. The last thing you want is to be in a situation where the tasks start piling up and then you say, oh, wait a minute, did I turn on the fuel pump? Did I turn on the aux? What did I do? So since we're coming down to 10,000, I'm going to do all of it right now, except for the bleeds, mainly because I don't want to make anybody uncomfortable. So turn on our lights. Passengers are already seated. Bleeds are on and normal right now. There'll be min-ice protections not needed. Landing altitude is set. Everything else is depressurizing nicely. And we are good to go. Our altitude is set. We're losing some frames here because of the heavy overcast, which is not unusual. I'm going to start to slow. If for no other reason than to give us a little more time to do what we need to do. Alright, when those thick overcasts are within a certain distance of us, our frame rates go right in the toilet, which is probably why I need a second GPU, but I'm waiting. I'm waiting to afford a pot to piss in, much less a second GPU, but also I'm waiting because I suspect in about a month or so, NVIDIA is going to announce its next generation of card, in which case I won't need a second GPU, with all the complications that entails, which includes finding the right space for it and the right slot and wiring it up and knowing that it's not really going to work in many other applications, and sometimes it won't even work well in this. So I'm going to arm the approach, which doesn't do much for us unless we want to fly it as an overlay, but what it will do is when we get close enough, it will extend the center line and it'll give us that added little bit of situational awareness. And I'll also set our altimeter, which is going to immediately put us into overspeed. Let me just pull off some power here, because it's going to assume we're lower and that our air is denser. I'm going down to 2983, which is going to lower our barber pole. Alright, there we go. And I'll let the plane slow a little bit because I don't really want us to be going crazy at this point. Now, just to review, what we're going to do, and I'll preset the heading, is when we get about 3/4 of a mile to a mile away, we're going to turn to 085, and we're going to intercept the 089 outbound localizer. We're going to fly that for 6.6 miles, or to 6.6 DME. But what we're also going to do is, now we're 8 miles away from our turn, what we're also going to do is we're going to flip nav 2 over to also the localizer, so we have it in both sides because that's required for a Cat 2 arrival. It's also required for situational awareness. It's required by many companies because, hey, what if the pilot not flying all of a sudden has to become the pilot flying? Getting back to our philosophy of getting shit squared away, you don't want to say, okay, now, got to switch my nav sources over, got to switch my radios, got to make sure I'm looking at the same thing. My my fellow pilot is looking at, and so all the rest of that. You want to sort of share the same picture of the world is more or less what it is. Alright, so there is our runway, if I'm not mistaken. I do believe it is. Alright, we have outcell set. That is fine. A little bit slow, so let me just speed us up. And there's our overcast. And put our bleeds to min. Get ready for the turn. Now, every time I've done this before, I have done it too soon, so I'm going to wait. .5 miles. 1.3. Hovering over the heading, select. 1.0. All right, let's do it now. And what we'll also do is switch over our nav source. And now we're cutting in on this, you see? And I've done it again. I've turned too soon. No, maybe I haven't turned too soon because we have our little reverse sensing. There we are. Okay. Not bad. And actually we turned a little too late. Okay, so we're going to fly outbound on this sucker. Let's get the magic heading here. I've got about 3 degrees too far now to come back to it. Don't want to get too much slower than that. Got a little bit of wind blowing us to the left too, so I'm going to have to crank in a little bit more right heading to come back on it. Alright, we're at DME 3.3. There we go. We'll make our heading about 9.1 to compensate for the wind. Maybe that'll do it. Let's see. Almost. Alright, 4.4. Now, oh, we're pretty close. 5.1. You see, we're just tracking this. There it is. Giving it a little bit more. 5.9. Now at 6.6 we're going to turn to 135 and we're going to start a clock, and we're going to do that for a minute. A little slow here. Let me feed in a little bit of power. Actually put in a notch of flaps. Alright, there we go. Turning. Timing. And we're going to fly that outbound. This is a procedure turn. And we're also going to spin our altitude down to 2500, hit alt cell, hit vertical speed, and give us a nice gentle descent. Okay. 25 seconds in. And unfortunately, I just accidentally spun our heading bug around. I'm going to roll out a little bit of power. Alright, I'm going to add a little bit of time to this now. I'm gauging also my position by the glide slope. The point of the whole procedure is to lose altitude and to keep us below the glide slope without being below terrain. Is basically it. It's a altitude losing device. to do it in a limited amount of space because you go outbound a little bit. Okay, that's a minute 15. And minute 30. Okay, so now we do a 180 and we just come right back, put our heading bug right on the point of the tip of the CDI. Idea there being that will give us an angle to cut in, a reasonable angle to cut in and intercept. And it will. And as soon as we get turned around a little bit, I'm going to switch us into nav mode, which will lock onto the localizer, and then switch us onto approach mode once I start to see the glide slope indicator come in. Also, the idea is that we've given ourselves enough space that we're not going to blow through this on the way back in, and I hope that's right. And there's our extended center line, and you can see that looks about right. We might blow through it very slightly. Okay, into nav mode we go. Loc displays. Keeping a little bit more power in. There we go, it's got it. But let's see how it grabs it. It knows it's there. That's what that light means. Okay, it's acquired it. That's good. Now we're just going to wait for this to turn into a diamond and come back on scale. We're at a nice sane speed for a change. Look at that. That's pretty good. Okay, nav 1 and 2 are the same, which is why we can use either one as the DME. Tweak our trim ever so slightly. And here's our overcast or undercast again. We can set runway heading now on our heading bug because we're done using that to maneuver. Here comes our localizer. We can drop our gear, put in another notch of flaps. That's complaining because I dropped the flaps before the gear was fully down and locked. Start to slow to our final approach speed. There is our glide slope. There is the indication that we're looking to capture it. And now get ourselves configured nice and early because we've got this tailwind. It's a quartering tailwind too. This is going to be fun. Alright, I'm just going to wait till we capture and reduce to approach power, which is about 18% once we start going down. Matter of fact, I'm going to bring it down just a little bit now so that we actually are slower. There we go. We're right at VAP. Now, watch. What'll happen is we'll start to go down, and that's when I'll gently roll the power off, and nobody will know the difference. Maybe. So our descent will actually fully match. Look at that. Now watch. Look at that. Look at that. Okay. Now what we will do is we'll throw the HUD up there, and let's see if we can make this work. A little more power. That's my additive working there. Now it says I'm high, and last time I practiced this, I was high. So it takes a little hunting around here to get this right. Especially with this tailwind, which is blowing this way and that right now. Trying to just get it trimmed out just there. Trying. Not necessarily succeeding. I'm fighting it a little bit with my feet. Well, that's a reasonable power setting, and a reasonable speed, and a reasonable rate of descent. I got a peg right on the 3 degrees.
Light slow.
I'm not sure why it's saying that, considering that our flight director is telling us to actually descend. And the last time I did this, it left us high, so I'm just going to ignore it, to tell you the truth. It's still telling us we're high. I'm going to descend a little bit more. Now you see, now it complains. But you see the meatball there? It's actually below. Alright, well, screw this. Look at that, look at that, we're a dot high and it's bitching. I hate you. Alright, screw you. Look at that, we're now 2 dots high and it's bitching. Oh, shut up. We're about as stable as you can get given this tailwind here.
50, 40, 30, 20, 10.
Look at that. It's bitching about that? Look at that. How on earth can you complain about that? Alright, well, one day scenery and nav aids and bitch and betties will all be in agreement, but at the moment they're not. Anyway, with that said, there's not much scenery to see here. Welcome to Lucknow. From here we're going to, you'll love this, Kathmandu. Because it's really what I want to do. If I ever get out of here, I'm going to Kathmandu. And I never thought I'd be quoting Bob Seger, but there you have it. Anyway, with palm trees, mansions, fake apartment buildings, and really fake grass here along with us. Look forward to seeing you again in the near future, and hope you fly with us wherever your destination may be. See you real soon.